Hello, this is Deborah Clay, fiction author and podcaster, and this is Castaway Books. I've been asking authors to tell me about the books that have influenced their life and inspired their writing. Now it's time to shine the light on book bloggers, those amazing writers who tirelessly support and cheer on authors with their book reviews. This week's guest is Jenna C. Henry. So I am so delighted to meet you almost in the person, and you've got two names because I've always known you as Jenna C. Henry, which is the name you write by and the name you do your book reviews by as a book blogger. But your real name is Jean Madder, which you use for the OK Boomer podcast.
Yay for boomers!
Brilliant. I think
That's right. I've sort of switched hats from the author hat to the OK Boomer hat. But now I'll get back into books.
A little plug for your podcast, which you do with
right. OKBoomerPod.com. I might as well just get it all out. And my sister and I do it, and we just have a lot of fun talking about life, what it's like to be a boomer, what it's like to have millennial kids, how we all get along. Life is good.
And what age group or years is the boomer? I think I'm a baby boomer. I was born 1960. Am I still a boomer?
Yes, up to 64. 1964. It's like 1954 to 64 or 19 something in that range. So yes, you are, whether you want to be or not.
I do. I think we were very privileged a generation. We had it good.
We did. At least that's looking back on it. That's right.
Much better. Our parents who grew up just after the war, and our children who had all sorts of problems with the economy and, getting on in the UK, certainly getting on the housing ladder, so many problems. And also jobs were scarce by the time our children were looking for jobs. But we had a time when you could walk into, for us, the Alfred Marks Bureau and say, I want a job. And you say, which one would you like?
Right. Yes. Things have, well, and as we probably all have, I've read a lot of World War II books within the last few years. They've become popular, which is good. But obviously, you in the UK had it a lot harder than we did. Yeah. So I mean, 2 world wars where you're right there. That's pretty tough.
Oh, well, before we move into your first book, the other thing to say is you've written the Golden Age of Charlie series, which was a trilogy, isn't it? It's about
it is. You're right. Yes.
That's about new opportunities at later life. I'm thinking, right?
Right, about a woman named Charlie, and just how you do cope with all of a sudden the kids are gone, your maybe regular schedule has changed. Are there lots of possibilities, or is that kind of scary? Can you still have fun? So it was a fiction, happy fiction, encouraging fiction.
And you've done a tremendous job as a book reviewer, and I personally am very grateful to you because you reviewed my very first book that came out, and you were very generous and kind. And I've just been so impressed by the amazing work that book reviewers, book bloggers do, and that's why it's really nice to meet you all and cheer you and say thank you.
Oh, how nice! Yeah, that was your book. Your first book was The Borrowed Boy, right?
Oh, remembered.
I love that. I love that book. I think somehow I've missed 2 of your books, so I'll remedy that. But I've read Borrow Boy and the cruise one.
The Cruise.
Forever. That was great.
You've only missed one, which is Just Be, and the last act, which came out last week.
All right, so I can get caught up. All right, good. I promise I will.
I'm not here to plug my books. I'm here. It's all about you today.
Oh, well, thank you.
Anyway, the format of this show is that we like to hear about the books that have influenced your life and your growing up, as books have the wonderful power to do. And we go through the ages. So let's start with your first book and why.
Yes, I would say, in all honesty, it was hard for me to pick books because I've always loved to read my whole life. So I have read so many books. So I might have even surprised myself, but I decided I was thinking about my sister, let's put it that way, when I was deciding on these books. And she is not an avid reader. Was the scientist in the family. So I thought, well, what would she like to read? If I were recommending books to her, what would she like to read? And I thought, well, a good place to start would be popular books that have really, the 100 million bestseller copies, which we probably all aspire to. So I'm sorry, I'm not mentioning more of the indie authors because, first of all, like you said, I reviewed so many books. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings because every book I've really enjoyed. So I thought I'll just do this. I'll just pretend I'm talking to my sister and trying to get her excited about reading. All right, so back in the way long time ago, 1967, Gone with the Wind was re-released, the movie, which I've always really enjoyed. The movie is now kind of gone on hard times, and probably rightly so. Times change and values change, and I understand it. But if you want a movie or a book that is just over the top drama and romance, and it's a very engrossing book. So the book is actually 1,000 pages long, so you have to be determined to read it. But that really got me into like, wow, movies and books are really fantastic. They can really take you away, and you can go to the old South and see what life was, at least maybe pretend like back then. So that's the first book I'm talking about. Have you read it?
I haven't read the book. I've seen the film several times. It's in fact a whole afternoon aside. I think it's about 4 hours, isn't it?
Yes, that was back when you had to have an intermission, and that's right. That's right. So that I would recommend that. Like I said, now you may have to think that this was written. It was published, I think, in 1937, if I'm recalling right. So it was a while ago, and times have changed. And the author, Margaret Mitchell, was definitely a woman of the South and a woman of the Old South. So she came from that perspective. So there's a lot of things you have to think about. But overall, if you want a page turner, that's the book for you.
How did you come to read this book, and what was going on in your life at that time?
Well, as I was trying to recall, I would have been in junior high. I had seen the movie. My mom took us to see the movie, me and my sister. And I was kind of surprised because that was pretty, that wasn't really like her to like have a fun day out. So I think perhaps she had a thing for Clark Gable, I'm guessing, because she would have grown up in that era. So we went to the movie, and then I remember I received the book as a gift, and it was because the reason I got this book was I was helping a friend who broke her leg at school, and I was her book carrier and helped her, navigate the hallways. And her mom gave me the book Gone with the Wind as a thank you gift. So wow, I just started reading, and I can remember the night I was reading it, I was babysitting. There was a family I babysat for a lot, but the poor kids, they had to fend for themselves that night. I just kept on reading. So
yeah, but that sounds typical of you, that you were the one caring as a child, because I know later on you're going to tell us, but you went into a caring profession, which we shall talk about further on. But you probably had that caring nature from a young age.
I guess you're right. Looking back, I probably did. Not that I didn't like to have fun, and I mean, but you got to have fun a little bit. So are we ready to move on with my life?
On book 2.
I mean, people probably, that's the one thing you forget when you're old. How many years ago did all this happen? Oh my goodness. So we're back to we'll move it up to the 70s. The late 1970s. And that's when I discovered James Herriot, who I believe his name is actually James White. But truly, those are wonderful books. And how I discovered those was that's when you're right. I had gone to school in grad school to be a speech therapist, and I was at my first job, which was out in the country. It was at a developmental center, which is where those places were back then. The good thing was, I'll tell you a little bit more about the developmental center. It had gone from medieval days, the federal laws had been passed, so it had changed from being a medieval place to actually a more modern, supportive place that cared for the residents and gave therapy. So I was in the first wave of people who started working there under the new format. So there were a lot of young people. It was fun, or we had a good time. Well, then I lived in a little town, had my first apartment on my own. I lived near the public library, so I would walk down to the library, and apparently no one else used this library, because every time I walked in, they had the cart right near the door, the wheeled cart, and they had the books, and those were the best sellers. The bestseller shelf was always full, so it was great. I could just, it was like being on Amazon, except I didn't know there was Amazon, but I could just walk in and grab every new book there was. And that's how I started on the James Herriot books, which I certainly hope, I'm assuming he is exactly as he wrote, the most caring, compassionate, patient, understanding, but still fun person. I really do admire him. The one thing I have trouble with is keeping track of the order of their books, because the titles are all from the hymn song. And probably most of us know the words, but I get mixed up with which is All Things Wise and Wonderful. All Creatures Great and Small, I think is the first one.
The Lord God made them all.
Yeah, right. And
but you were reading about the Yorkshire Dales. Had you ever been to England when you were reading that?
No, well, no, that's not, let me think. I had not known about the Yorkshire Dale, so that was fascinating too. And I hadn't really realized that probably at the time when Mr. Herriot was writing, life was fairly similar to what life had been for a long time. I'm guessing for the small farmers, that their lives were, maybe they had a tractor, but a lot of them were still using plow horses. And so that was interesting. I had been to England, I forgot. I was really fortunate, and I went with a group to Paris when I was in college, and we stayed there for a semester. And a couple of us girls, we went over to England for a weekend. That was really fun. And then we, came back. So I think like, oh yeah, I forget I actually did stuff. I should tell my kids that. They probably don't realize I was wandering around Europe by myself, basically.
But I was saying before we started recording that we had similar background, and you were what's now called speech and language therapist, and I was an occupational therapist. And those paramedics have very close, lots of similarities in our training, I think, with the going out on placements and all the stuff, alongside the studying.
I sometimes wish I had really, I ended up changing careers. But then you think, like, what if I had really stuck with it? Things have changed, and you probably noticed that too, because like autism wasn't really a recognized condition, I guess I would say, back when I started. And I think that would have been really fascinating to really try to learn more about that and pursue that whole area. So in that case, I wish I had stuck with it, because I think that would have been.
So did you, so if we go on to the next book, I might find out what happened after you became a speech therapist then.
Right, so after I became a speech therapist, we're up into the 80s. So I didn't get married real young, but I got married in the early 80s and had kids. And it was, I know it's hard. All my nieces and nephews, I don't have grandkids yet, but all my nieces and nephews, everybody works. It works out fine for them. All the kids go to daycare. Everything is great. They're doing a wonderful job. But I just thought it was splendid to stay home. And so I did. I thought we had a really good time too. So I read books to them, and I read books, and we just had fun. But I was a stay-at-home mom then from the 80s on.
I think that you sound as if you're trying to defend it, because nowadays it's quite rare. But my
Well, it's
husband,
different. Yeah, I suppose in some ways,
mm,
but really they're all doing great. I have to say, you know, commend all the young people I know. They're doing a great job. But I just thought, oh, there's something. Your kids, they don't realize probably right now how fast your kids do grow up.
I know, I know. People say they're not with you forever, but you don't realize that in the whole span of your life, it is such a tiny, short proportion of your life that your children are with you. It's gone in a flash, isn't it?
It really is. And when you think of just the time they're with you, well, after they're about 10 or 12, they're moving on. So you really only have maybe 10 years where you're mom and the most wonderful thing in the world. So I am super happy with my choice. And I guess I just throw it out, something to think about, even if you maybe spend a couple years at home, just to.
Well, it was my husband who gave up work when our daughter was born. He couldn't give up the work quick enough because he was so much wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. And
Oh, that's so nice.
he never
Oh,
went back to work. He stayed, he gave up work when she was born. She's now 34. So I've always been the wage earner.
oh, but that's probably worked out great, huh?
Yeah, they're very, very close. Lovely daughter. He did a good job, and he looked after me because he cooked the meals, he kept the house, he made sure I had everything I needed when I was traveling for work. And yeah, so I could have a career and enjoy being a mum, knowing I was completely supported and I wasn't trying to juggle a career and being a mum and feeling guilty. Well, I did feel guilty. You always feel guilty. If you're doing one thing, you feel guilty you're not doing the other thing.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Because you're right. I mean, sometimes we would go away maybe for a night or two, and beforehand, I would think like, "Oh, yay, we're going away for a night or two." Well, then I'd be like, "Oh, I miss everybody. I wish I were home." My husband, now we were kind of the opposite. So, and this is probably another reason why I did stay home, is my husband traveled all the time, so he was always gone. So I thought I can't leave these. I mean, they would have no one.
Mm.
So. And yeah, that all worked out great too. And I really enjoyed those years.
And
And
what were you reading then?
well, of course, I was reading and reading. I again, so I guess I went to more movies when I was younger. I went to see The Eye of the Needle, um, which was based on a book by Ken Follett, who he has written or he has sold, I don't know, like hundreds of millions of books. I mean, it's like really. And he's a writer. He's another one in some ways like Margaret Mitchell, and he could just churn them out. I mean, yeah, there again, he could write a 1,000-page book before you know it. And so that led me to realize he was an author, and I looked up his books. And The Pillars of the Earth had just come out, which was book one in the Kingsbridge series, which actually got me interested in historical fiction, which is probably continues to be my favorite. So if I remember correctly, Pillars of the Earth started at around 1100. So he ended up having 4 books in the series, but a 5th one is coming out this September. So he's still writing 1,000-page books. So I really enjoyed that book because he focuses on several families, which is interesting. So it's really a saga. And so there's the poor family, there's the Lord, there's whoever's the king or queen then. So there's a diverse selection of people and how life goes on. But the focus of this time was it's a small village when it starts, Kingsbridge, and they get the idea they want to build a cathedral, which you got to think is really phenomenal. I mean, your cathedrals are beautiful, and they were built so long ago, back when I didn't even realize people could do things. Well, they could do all kinds of things. So that was, I like that on several levels. For the story, which is always there again, he's a page turner kind of writer. So I enjoyed it for the stories. But the history was really fascinating. How things were similar, but of course not. The only thing I would have to kind of take Mr. Follett to task for, take author Follett to task, is his books have become, because I came back to them during the pandemic. So I dropped him for a while. And then during the pandemic, I thought, oh yeah, I used to like him. I'll keep reading. So what I noticed between reading him in the 80s and reading him now, he's gotten a lot more sexually explicit in his books, which times have changed. I get that.
How did it affect your enjoyment? Did you rather it as it was or as it is?
I probably didn't like it as well, partly because he fixes on some kind of odd things. He tends to repeat some odd things that are kind of disquieting to me, which I don't want to say anymore, but it's you know, what do they say? What in romance books they have different stages of, like the bedroom doors open, the bedroom doors shut, that kind of thing. So he goes pretty far. And he mentioned probably bodily parts that I wouldn't mention in a book. Let me put it. That's probably but
I'm a bit old-fashioned. I know the thing now is write more steamy romance things, but for me, I like the door shut. I just want to get a sense of it. I want the romance and the sense and the feeling, but I don't want explicit. And if I'm reading a romance book and I don't know that a really explicit sexual scene's coming up and it feels it's been put in there just because, it completely puts me off, I'm afraid.
Well, I would agree. And I would think one thing too is there's always so many ways you can really describe things. So then you're kind of hearing like same old thing, or people are getting like way too creative, and it just yeah, I would rather not have it. I agree. And like I said, I don't even want to say what he does that bothers me, because it's pretty anyhow.
We all have different tastes.
Yeah, right. But if you want a good story, that's him. But you do have to know that his later books are more explicit. No. Well, the book I'm going to talk about next. So now we're moving way up into more like that.
I love this one. It's my favorite.
Isn't it? I know.
Loved it, adored it. You better tell us what it is.
Lessons in Chemistry.
Lessons in Chemistry.
Yeah. Such an unusual book. Now, I bought this book for my sister. You know, she's the one I'm trying to get to read. And I thought she'll have to like this. It's such a good story. And it's about a scientist. So yeah, this is a wow. I should read it again. Enough time has gone by that I'd like to read it again, because, you know, the first time through you're kind of wanting to find out. Right, racing through it. So I'd like to read it again. But like, who was your favorite character in it? Can you remember some of the characters?
I do, yes. Well, her really. I love the romance between her and her partner right at the beginning. Don't want to say too much and give it away.
We're gonna have a pause.
Hang on, can't hear you.
Was it or not? Or you... I'll be back soon.
Jenna's just had to leave the room to answer the door as these things happen. Her dog barking was her warning that somebody's just at the door. So you can enjoy, if you're watching, you can enjoy the waves behind me, because I've got a lovely scene of being on a castaway. Here she comes, returned. There we are.
So all is well. So we were talking favorite characters. You had to like the dog too, right?
Yes, I did. It was strange to write from the dog's point of view, but it was done very well.
Very, very well. Yes, I would say most people like the dog. Just the way she did her TV show. I'm assuming most people have read it, so we're not giving away too many spoilers. But that was so creative, her cooking show. And how did she always end it? About children, help your mother set the table.
Yes, gonna give your mother a rest. Go and set the table and let your mother have a rest.
Yes. A really, really good book. I don't know if she's written anything since. Do you? Bonnie Garmus is the author's name.
I don't know. I only read it a little while ago. I read it earlier this year for a book club read, but I did love it.
Yeah, very good. Have you read any of the other books that I have talked about so far? So you've read Life in Chemistry. Anything else, Gone with the Wind, you've read?
didn't read that, saw the film. James Herriot I've read. I've not read any Ken Follett, but I might do so now. Yeah. But so what was going on in your life around lessons in chemistry? This is the time you started doing your podcast just before the pandemic, I understand.
Right. Right. Obviously, we did not plan it that way. We planned to do a podcast. And then by episode 4 or 5, we started realizing something's going on in the world. And we even talked about, before we podcast again, we said, what should we do? I mean, because when you record a podcast, it's not coming out for another week or two. You're always, recording, obviously, or what we do is ahead of time. So we would record it, get it all ready to go, and then it'd come out 2 weeks later. And we thought, well, should we really be talking about it? Because 2 weeks from now, maybe it'll be all over. Yeah, right. Ha ha. It wasn't all over, was it, in 2 weeks? So, yeah, we started the podcast, and we've done 95 episodes.
Wow,
so we're almost to 100. Yeah, I was going to mention some other books at those in the 20 from the year 2000 to now. So The Help, I thought, was a really good book. Have you read that? And that became a movie, I believe, too, right? And
read that, loved that.
And the Joy Luck Club books.
Read that.
I had read, I think that was Amy Tan's first book. So she's writing about things based on her family from China. So I think that was really good because, to me at least, here in Ohio, there were now more mainstream books that focused on different types of people and different cultures. And, that's certainly really good. And then I just had to throw in to laugh about, I mean, that was when 50 Shades of Grey came out, is in this time period, like, oh my gosh. Which that I did not even.
I never read it. Did you read it?
No, well, in all honesty, I might have started it, and just because you get curious, it's such a big deal. And then I put that one down. So yes, I love doing the podcast. I actually loved writing my books. Although, and I do want to write again, but I'll probably kind of switch what I'm doing, because I've sort of changed my life somewhat too. So I used to drink. I don't drink anymore. I thought that was a good change for me. And I was actually going to have my books here to show you and show you a cover, but I realized that each one of them might have a wine glass in some way, shape, or form. I thought, why did I do that? So I just didn't want to. So that's partly why I've stopped, because I just didn't want to.
Have to buy them and look at them, won't they?
Yes, right. They're fun. They are not. They're just fun, humorous, hopefully entertaining. I don't know, but yeah. So I'm gonna probably strike out in a different direction, which brings me and I really debated about talking about the last book, but I thought I'm going to do it because I'm actually kind of proud of myself, because I've set myself a big challenge, which is to finally read the Bible in a year, which it would easily take a year. I mean, this isn't like just reading Gone with the Wind. This is 66 books. So you're reading a lot. So how I'm doing it is, because I started reading the New Testament, and then I thought, well, I should read the Old Testament. So that's what I'm doing. I'm reading a book from the Old, and a chapter a day from the Old and a chapter a day from the New Testament every day. And so my Bible has those ribbons where you can mark your space. So it's like so exciting for me every day. I get to turn a page and start a new
Have you finished
space.
it yet?
I'm sorry?
Have you finished it yet?
No. I only started a couple months ago, actually, but I think I can get done by the end of the year. Well, why I'm liking doing it, I've realized, is because at least the churches I've experienced, it's like you hear the same Bible verses all the time. So there's like 150 or 100 popular Bible verses that probably most everybody knows, whether you're really into church or not. And then I thought, well, there's a lot more than just like 50 verses. So it's really helpful to read the whole thing step by step. And like the Old Testament, anybody would enjoy reading that. It's like fantastic stories about really entertaining. I mean, that's good. The New Testament for me is much harder to understand, and I'm glad my the Bible I'm using has a commentary to explain some of it, because but you gotta admire like that Apostle Paul. I mean, he can write. I mean, he can really write. You know, there again, I'm probably wrong, because I always think like, oh, people who lived a long time ago, they wouldn't know as much as me. Well, they knew tons more than I did. They could write much better in a much more sophisticated, intelligent way. I thought, wow. So I'm really enjoying that.
Yes, my mother's passed away now, but when my mother was alive, she set herself a challenge, and she did. She read every page of the Bible from beginning to end, and I admired her for doing that, sticking with it. I've read the New Testament all the way through because the stories repeat. The stories are written from different perspectives, aren't they? But a lot of it is repetitious. But I know what I was going to say. Long while ago, I was going through a difficult time in my life, and I had picked up the books that a Gideon Bible, and the Gideons have a thing in the front that says, if you are feeling this, look at these verses. If you're feeling that, so, yeah, you know, if you're out of work, if you're anxious, if you feel far from God, if you're leaving home, all these things, and they have verses. And I used that a lot at that time to get through some difficult period in my life. And I thought to myself, this is the best self-help book ever. Why aren't people turning to this? Because and I loved the way things were catalogued. Look for this, look for that. I was so impressed. I wrote to the Gideons. They gave me a whole pack of little leaflets that told you where to find the different things in the Bible. And I kept leaving them everywhere because I wanted everybody to discover.
I wonder I would really be interested in that too. Maybe it's all online now, right? I mean, maybe you can.
I haven't got any left now. This was about a good while ago. But yes, if you look up the Gideons, this is what they do. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Really, really it is. So right, because now there's like podcasts and everybody has a website, and that's all really good. But yeah, I may have to report back to you when I finish it. I'll let you know that. The end result.
So are you planning on writing anything else? Any more books?
I have some ideas, so I hope to do that. But as you know, I mean, I really admire people who can keep on, like you, who can keep writing and writing, because it's hard. I think. I mean, it's enjoyable, but it's a lot of work, and the editing, and there's a lot to it. So I have to, get psyched. I think I get those writing muscles going again.
Well, my final question, though I could talk to you on my little island forever, is if you're marooned on this island, what is your luxury that you will take with you?
Right. I think you said if I could bring one special thing, of course, books would be nice. And looking at the island, I mean, it's right now it's gorgeous. I see palm trees, and it looks like there's a nice breeze and just enough sun, and the water's that beautiful color. Yes, and you could wade out a little bit, and there's probably little interesting creatures to discover. And then yes. Well, I thought I thought I'm just going to be crazy because I could pick anything, right? I thought I would love to have a grand piano because I wanted to get it back into playing more. And I have an upright piano that's been passed through the generations. It's horribly out of tune. It's so out of tune. I probably hate to have anyone come and tune it. But my sister has a gorgeous grand piano, and I thought, no, that would really be something. See if we could put it back up the beach a ways, and then
sounds lovely.
I thought, and if I were by myself, it wouldn't matter. I could just practice and not drive anybody crazy, huh?
Wonderful. Yes, I can hear your piano playing now. It's making the island even more beautiful.
Oh, good. Thank you.
It has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for all that you do for authors. You do a tremendous service, and we're grateful. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and you have a good rest of the summer. And are you traveling anywhere? Or you're home for a while?
I'm going off on another cruise in September.
Oh, how
Mediterranean
nice.
cruise, yeah.
Oh, really? Australia. So you
No, no,
go down,
no, Mediterranean.
oh, Mediterranean, sorry.
In September.
Okay, great. Oh, nice. Have you done that before? That area?
I have. I'm going to say goodbye now on here, but don't go away because we will talk after, okay?
Okay, great. Well,
Bye
thank you so
bye.
much.
Thank you.